Around 1500 BC, somewhere on the Norwegian coast, a chieftain stands on a cliff top watching a single ship crawl over the horizon. He is not afraid of that ship. He has been waiting for it all season. Everything he owns depends on it. On board is something his world cannot make, something so valuable it has completely rewritten how his society works. It has turned farmers into warriors and warriors into kings. It is bronze. Here is the strange part. Norway had no copper, no tin, and without both of those metals you cannot make bronze. Yet Bronze Age Norwegians were buried with weapons and jewellery cast from metal that began its journey as far away as Cyprus. Sardinia, the British Isles, the Alps. Every scrap of it passed through chain after chain of trade partners across Europe. Norway was plugged into a network stretching from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean, and they paid with something lying on the beach. The Bronze Age in Norway began around 1800 BC and lasted until roughly 500 BC, 1300 years. That is longer than the entire Viking Age, longer than the time between the Norman conquest and today. This era brought something the Stone Age never had: permanent farms, fixed homes, fields that fed the same family for generations. Longhouses and farmyards appeared around the Oslo Fjord, the Trondheimsfjord, and the fertile flatlands of Jæren. People stopped following the animals. They stayed put, grew food, and produced something dangerous and new: surplus. Surplus meant wealth. Wealth meant somebody could accumulate it. But the metal everyone wanted came with a problem. Scandinavia had no copper deposits worth mining and no tin to speak of. To join the Bronze Age, Norway had to trade. This is not a guess. Lead isotope analysis of Bronze Age artefacts proves every scrap of the metal was imported. The entire era. What did Norway have that the rest of the world wanted badly enough to send metal north for 13 centuries? Amber. Fossilised tree resin, golden and warm, washed up in quantity along the Baltic and North Sea coasts. The ancient world prized it for its colour and its supposed magic. Amber was Bronze Age luxury goods. The deal was almost too good to be true. Decorative pebbles moving south, weapon-grade metal coming north. Norway said yes immediately. The network Norway joined was bigger than anyone standing on that beach could have imagined. Nordic traders were linked to the tumulus culture of Central Europe, and through them, hand to hand, to Mycenaean Greece. The same world that fought the Trojan War, the same world that built Mycenae, connected link by link to Norway. The copper itself came from shifting sources. First Slovakia and Austria through Central German trade hubs, then Britain, then Sardinia and Iberia. The routes bent and moved as politics shifted across Europe for 1,000 years. Amber moved the opposite way, down what historians call the Amber Road, passed hand to hand through dozens of societies. A piece of amber picked up on a Norwegian beach could end its journey in a tomb by the Mediterranean. And the proof of how far that chain reached is still turning up in Scandinavian soil. Actual Egyptian artefacts, not copies, have been found in Scandinavian Bronze Age burials, objects that crossed an entire continent. The ancient world was more connected than we give it credit for. And Norway sat at the top of the map, trading. Bronze did not just change what tools people used, it reorganized Norwegian society from top to bottom. Massive elite burial mounds began to rise, packed with imported axes, swords and jewellery. The mounds mark the arrival of chieftains, people who controlled the trade, commanded labour and collected tribute. For the first time in Norwegian history, some people were meaningfully more powerful than others. You can watch the change happen in the rock art. The carvings of this era are dominated by one motif: ships, large crude vessels carved in ritual scenes, not just transport, status, power, and connection to a wider world. The first longship was still 2,000 years away. The obsession with ships was already ancient Norwegian tradition. There is an uncomfortable part of the story. All that wealth moving along the coasts was not always traded peacefully. Around the 13th century BC, warriors from the Nordic world fought at the Tollens Valley in northern Germany. Tollens is the largest excavated direct battle site of that entire age, anywhere in the world. Bronze Age Scandinavia was not just trading, it was also raiding. The two have never been far apart here. The seeds of the Viking Age were being planted 1,500 years before the first longship touched water. Which brings us back to the chieftain on his clifftop, watching that ship crawl in from the horizon. He was not just watching a trader arrive, he was watching Norway's entry point into an economy that spanned a continent. Bronze from Cyprus by way of the Alps, amber flowing back down the same roads to Greece. Warriors at Tollens, ship carvings pointing straight at the longships to come, all of it one story. The Bronze Age Norwegians were not isolated, and they were not primitive. They were participants in one of the most sophisticated economic networks the ancient world ever built. And for 1,300 years, they were very, very good at it. Then, around 500 BC, the network began to fail. The bronze stopped coming north. The climate cooled. The trade routes shifted south for good. Norway's golden connection was over. A new metal was about to arrive. One Norway could finally make for itself from the bogs of its own valleys. Iron. Cheaper than bronze, harder than bronze, and available to anyone willing to dig. When every farmer can own a weapon, power stops belonging only to the man who controls the trade. With iron comes something Norway had never seen at this scale before: organised, systematic warfare. The Iron Age is darker, harder and bloodier than anything that came before it. That story is next. Every hoard, every mound, every carved ship from this era says the same thing: Norway was never on the edge of the world. It was the northern end of everything, and it had been for a very long time. Subscribe for the full journey, from the Stone Age to modern Norway. None of it is boring, I promise. And drop a comment. Did you know Bronze Age Norway was linked hand to hand all the way to Egypt? Most people have no idea.